Shabbat Shalom. Oh, really, Shabbat Shalom. My prayer for you and for all of us that this is a Sabbath of peace, of genuine peace. How are you doing? If there's anything the clergy can do for you, please, after Shabbat is over, pick up the phone and call us, the synagogue, or email us. We're here for you. As I think about the world in which we find ourselves today, I'm really thinking that there are three different experiences happening at the same time, three different groups of people. There are those who have been stricken by the virus. You are focused only on healing yourselves and keeping your family safe. As part of that group is the family of those stricken by the virus. For all of you, may you know healing. May you know speedy and full recovery. May you know health now and always. Then there's another group. There's our healthcare professionals who are exhausted, who are straining and stressed and scared for their own lives, scared for the decisions that they have to make. They are the soldiers on the front lines, caring for us, risking their lives for ours. There's an extension of that group as well. There are all of the essential employees, whether they're our grocery store workers or our delivery people, all walks of life, the essential employees who are going to work and putting their lives in many ways on the line so that our society can continue to function. For all of you who are still working, I wish you strength, blessing, and that you should know our gratitude, our true gratitude for that, all that you are doing. Then the third group is the rest of us. We're a diverse group. Some of us are able to work from home. Some of us are unemployed. Some of us are struggling. Some of us are doing just fine, continuing on with our day-to-day. But there is something that that third group, the rest of us, have in common. And that's the hidden and creeping up stress and difficulty of the world in which we find ourselves. When I go to the grocery store, which I try to do as infrequently as possible, or even when I'm out for a walk on the street or a jog through the neighborhood, it almost feels like every person I'm encountering is the enemy. Or maybe if not the enemy, they're an ally or they're a carrier of the enemy, because you ever notice, right, when you see someone else in the grocery store, in the street, all of a sudden, whereas once upon a time you would at least just pass, if not acknowledge each other and say hello, boom, we're all heading in different directions. We're spreading at least 6 feet apart, if not more. Our world is getting smaller. At every turn, we feel, however small, but it's there, a sense of threat, a sense of fear. That threat we carry home with us. And sometimes it can affect the people even in our own house, our husbands and wives, our spouses, our partners, our children. It can affect people with whom we're working, even if it's through a Zoom distance relationship. Committee members, people in all sorts of different ways in which we continue to interact. The stress starts to weigh on us. We are at that point, a couple weeks now into our physical separation, with still a month to go at least. We're at that point. I've come across a few interesting tales. A person called me recently, and he says to me, "Rabbi, I have the most loving wife." And I said to him, "That's wonderful." He says, "I have the most loving wife. You know, Rabbi, how we can contract this virus through the mouth, through the nose, and through the eyes. My wife is so loving that in order to protect me from COVID-19, I woke up to her holding a pillow tightly over my face." There's still another story similarly told of a woman who goes to visit her friend. And she remains on the driveway talking while her friend is there at the front door. "Where's your husband?" the woman on the driveway asks the woman at the front door. "In the garden," the woman at the door replies. "That's funny, I didn't see him as I walked by," says the friend. "You need to dig a little," the woman responds. Indeed, we're all feeling this tension as we are either stuck in a very small place together, or even on the streets as we walk by each other without actually walking next to each other. And it's with that in mind that we come now to the holiday of Pesach. As Rabbi Dallin said earlier, this is Shabbat HaGadol. This is the Sabbath immediately preceding Passover. And so in just a few days' time, we're obligated to tell the story, great story of our people. This is our ultimate national narrative. This is a story we reference multiple times a day in our prayer service. This is the story on which the entire holiday is built. This is a story that we reference and pray that just as God redeemed us once, so too will God redeem us again. We know the story. We were slaves in Egypt. After centuries of slavery and oppression, God finally hears our cries. God brings us out from Egypt with mighty wonders and outstretched arm. And God leads us 40 years through the wilderness to the promised land of Eretz Yisrael. This is our great story of redemption that we mark every day and especially at Passover time. But our rabbis ask why? After 400 years of slavery and servitude and persecution and oppression, did God finally hear our cries? Was it that we weren't crying hard enough before? Were we not crying at all? Surely for centuries our people must have been crying out to God. So why all of a sudden after 400 years did God begin to listen? And the answer comes in the beginning of the book of Shemot. Because when Pharaoh makes his decree with regard to killing the male children, two women step forward and say enough. The Torah tells us that it's Shifra and Puah who set out to rescue the baby boys that are born. Our rabbis teach that though they were going by the Egyptian names Shifra and Puah, it was actually Yocheved and Miriam, Moses' mother and Moses' sister, who said enough is enough, almost as if we're no longer waiting for God to help us, we're going to begin to help ourselves. And indeed, our rabbis teach that it was because the acts of righteous women the Jewish people were redeemed. Because of the acts of righteous women, Jewish people were redeemed. Shifra and Puah, or Yocheved and Miriam, no longer waited around for God to act. They began acting out of their own sense of chesed, of kindness themselves. Similarly, it's told that at that same time, they inspired a trend. And no longer were the slaves, no longer were our ancestors worried about only accomplishing their own quota of bricks to build. But that in that moment, people began helping each other. Even the most vulnerable and weak among them, they began to help them so that everybody could achieve their quota of bricks. For centuries, we worried about ourselves. We isolated to ourselves. There was a spiritual separation from another person. But finally, after 400 years, following the lead of Shifra and Puah, or Yocheved and Miriam, our ancestors began to help each other. And it was finally when God noticed that we began to help each other. It was then and only then that God sent the Redeemer, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, and that God started the path of redemption. It's only when we show tremendous acts of chesed, of kindness, to each other and especially to those who are in need, that God begins the act of redemption. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs tells a story of a chassid who is enjoying a Shabbos meal with his Rebbe. And we often translate this chassid idea as the righteous. But it comes from the word chesed, kindness. So here this chassid is having a Shabbos dinner with his Rebbe. And finally he has a chance to talk to his Rebbe one-on-one. And the chassid says to his Rebbe, the student says to his teacher, Rabbi, I want to know. Here we've been through the Holocaust, the greatest suffering to ever happen to any people in the history of the world, certainly to ever happen to our people, the Jewish people. We're also in a time of the birth of the state of Israel, the greatest act of redemption after the greatest act of suffering. Surely, the chassid says to the Rebbe, surely all of our waiting for the Mashiach, he's finally on his way. Why are we still waiting for the Messiah after all these years, after the suffering, after the return to the land of Israel? Why are we still waiting on the Messiah? The chassid asks of his Rebbe, the student asks of his teacher. Rebbe thinks for a while. And finally he says back to his chassid, to his student. He says, maybe it's not that the Mashiach, that we are waiting for the Mashiach. Maybe it's not that we're waiting for the Mashiach. Maybe the Mashiach is waiting for us. And Rabbi Sachs continues and he says, there's a tradition that the Mashiach exists in every generation, if only we are open to him or her. And so the Rebbe says to the Chassid, listen, if a Mashiach were to show up in a different branch of Chassidim than we are, surely we would reject him. He's part of a different community. If the Mashiach would show up as an Orthodox Jew, non-Orthodox would probably reject him and say it can't be the Mashiach. If the Mashiach were to show up as a non-Orthodox Jew, surely there are Orthodox who would say, nope, can't be the Mashiach. If the Mashiach were to show up as a different race, as a different color, as a different religion than one, surely that other would say, nope, it can't be the Mashiach, I reject you. You look different than I expected. You sound different than I expected. You act differently than I expected. The Rebbe says to the Chassid, maybe it's not that we are waiting for the Mashiach, but that the Mashiach is waiting for us to show our sense of chesed, our sense of kindness, not just to those who look exactly like us or act exactly like us or think exactly like us, but when we show true chesed, like Shifra and Pua, like Yocheved and Miriam, like our ancestors did to one another, and especially to the vulnerable among us, that's when Mashiach will come. That's when Messiah will come. When we get out of our own shells and truly show chesed, kindness, to all those who are around us. In just a few days' time, we're going to celebrate the Passover holiday. It will be different. There will be a sense of sadness in the midst of the holiday as we're not physically with our loved ones, our friends, and our family whom we enjoy celebrating Seder with. In the midst of our Seder, we're going to open the door for Eliyahu Hanavi. Now, of course, there are all sorts of jokes going around about that as well. Now, in a time of physical separation, we may open the door to Elijah, but we hope he remains on the driveway. Think about this idea that we open the door to the possibility of Moshiach. And not just we open the door to the idea, but we actually open the door. In our act of chesed, of opening the door and saying, let all who are hungry come and eat. In that moment, we're actually bringing Mashiach closer. We're bringing redemption closer. This Pesach, we're not going to be opening our door to extended family and to friends. But we will have a Passover among us. I invite you to begin the act of chesed, of kindness, right now. To those with whom you're sharing a house, to your extended family when you're on the phone with them, to your coworkers, to your friends who you talk to on the phone or through Skype or Zoom or FaceTime, through committees that you're on. How can we really show each other tremendous kindness? How can we give each other the benefit of the doubt? How can we choose truly kind words with those whom we love? Now, for many of us, we know that our spouses are not the Messiah. Mine might be, by the way. But for many of us, we know that our spouses are not the Messiah. And our children, well, our children are not yet the Messiah. But this Shabbat and this coming Pesach, let us choose words of incredible kindness to each other. And may we, through those small acts of chesed, of kindness, begin taking steps forward to larger acts of chesed, of kindness. And as we come out of this, may we truly realize how we can help those who are in need in so many different ways. And may those circles of chesed, of kindness, expand beyond and beyond and beyond, so that maybe by next year time, when we are ready to proclaim L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim next year in Jerusalem, maybe the Messiah will already be on his or her way. And maybe, please God, we will know not only redemption from this virus, but true and lasting redemption, peace in the world. All it takes is one act of kindness, after one act of kindness, after one act of kindness. We can begin now. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will, may this be our will. And let us say together, Amen. Shabbat Shalom.